Hello all, this is Barbara Mann from Your Empowered You, and welcome to our video on the keys to meeting and exceeding expectations. So in this video, we're going to talk about, if we are an employee at any level of the organization, expectations, they must be met. There's a minimum expectation to the job, and all of us, whether we are a C exec to middle management to frontline associate, there are minimum expectations of any position that must be met. So we're going to talk about those keys for meeting and exceeding those expectations. And whenever we talk about looking for tips on meeting and exceeding expectations, we always want to think about simplicity. Simplicity is the best to problem solving. If we have an issue with meeting or exceeding, look for more of the simple solutions. When we get complex solutions, it's very hard to obtain them. So always think about simplicity as we go through this sort of video in our mind. But the bottom line is that everybody, every single person in an organization at any level will always have expectations. That is just how any kind of organization that is successful, it measures its success, is how are you meeting against your goals and objectives. So every single employee has some sort of set of goals and objectives. It's used obviously for assessing performance, because if you don't measure something, how are you going to know how you're doing? It's obviously used for bonuses, raises, other types of compensation items that come into play. It's reviewed during internal type of promotion. So obviously you need measurements if you're going to look towards internal type of promotions for your employees. So you want to make sure that, and this is key, you want to make sure that you have some sort of electronic or hard copy of these expectations. I can't tell you how I have seen employees when you come into an organization, they don't know what they're measured on. They don't have this hard copy or something that they can refer to on what they're measured on. You have to know what you're measured on. You have to have some sort of written copy in electronic form, hard copy in your cubicle, whatever that looks like, so that you know what you are measured on. That is really, 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 really important to know what you're measured on, and you want to know where you stand regularly. So as managers, it's imperative, and I have other videos talking about this next issue, it's imperative to let employees know where they stand regularly. Whether you have monthly meetings, which I definitely am a strong advocate for, is to just have regular meetings with each of your employees if you're a manager, to let them know how they're doing, where do they stand, and also to talk about any type of feedback the employee may have, what are their career aspirations, things of that nature, but really to let them know where they stand, because you do not want to have a 6-month review or an annual review and all of a sudden you find out you're not performing to the minimum expectations. You want to know where you stand regularly, and you want to know what you are measured on. Very important. Know your data. So usually people have some sort of goals and objectives, and it says something like you need to meet this percentage of this, you need to have this many items produced in this amount of time. Something about, some sort of measurement, a specific type of measurement. You want to understand, though, how that data is collected. That is important. Data points, don't assume that you know how this data is collected. As a manager, as a leader of an office, everything rolls up to the entire office. There are certain things that obviously I was measured on. My staff was measured on. The office was measured on. This is how obviously, works for me too in terms of my compensation and the bonuses for the staff. I took that very seriously. I want to make sure that our staff got the most money that they could. That meant the whole office needed to meet and exceed expectations. So as a manager, I learned early on that I wanted to know how that data is collected. What's included in this data point? Is there anything excluded? How is this measurement calculated? Do not assume that you know, because trust me, you will be surprised at things that may be included, things that may be excluded. And ask questions. Ask questions of the people who are doing the data measurements, who are actually creating these reports. They will know how this data is collected. It's really important to understand this. I can't not stress this enough. Personally, I have been questioned. This was years ago, and I have this on actually another video that I talk about this. I was questioned on a low data point on my operation, and after sort of figuring out how this data is collected and asking questions from the person who knew this report, who had created the report, found out that it wasn't an issue at all. Other operations actually had the issue. What my issue actually was a data coding issue with a couple of associates. So know how your data is collected, know how things are coded, know what's included, know what's excluded. It's really important. As a manager, and if you're a frontline associate, know where to find your data. Where are all these reports, and how are these things connected? Understanding how things are connected and how data points affect one another is very important to meeting and exceeding expectations. Which leads us to that next issue. So once you start understanding how things are interconnected, you want to identify the root issue. Suppose you are below expectations on a particular metric. Always identify this root issue and avoid Band-Aid type of solutions. What I've seen many, many times is that people will be below expectation on a particular metric, whatever that looks like in their industry. And what they do is they chase after this one metric to increase. And what happens is that then 2 or 3 metrics kind of slip down, and not understanding how these things are connected creates problems. So always identify this root issue by asking why. So if you identify, say, low metric, and you approach, say, the unit manager or the frontline associate, say, hey, so-and-so, you're low on, say, cycle time, whatever that looks like. And you're asking, why do you think that is? Is this a time management issue? Is it a coding issue? Like I talked about in my own personal experience, it turned out to be a coding issue. Say, okay, yeah, maybe it's a time management issue. Okay, what is it about the time management issue? Is it a phone management issue, customer service issue, diary management? Do you have an issue with conflict resolution? What is it? So you're always asking the why, until you identify that actual root issue. Use your data to help identify the issue. So even if you ask someone, and they may not know, you use your data to help identify the issue and pinpoint the issue. So here's an example that actually, out of my own experience. So we had an associate, an employee, who was just, they were behind. A good, solid associate, good employee, but they would constantly be behind. So they were very high on certain metrics, very low on other type of metrics. They had a problem just keeping up with the position. So when you started analyzing, what was their issue? They were on the phone an extraordinary amount of time. And what was happening is a lot of people would call in and they would leave messages. Well, guess how long it was taking just to listen to the voicemail in a month? It was 24 hours. It was an insane amount of time just to listen to voicemail. So think about, okay, a few tweaks on this could really free up some of that time so someone could do their position. We used the phone reports to identify this issue. We calculated, the percentage of answer calls, how long they were on the phone calls, how many voicemails they got, what was the average minutes, and you start calculating this time. But we were using data to try to identify the root issue. So, you want to ask the input of the associate first, but always use your data as well to identify those root issues. So now we've identified our root issues, and now we're hopefully proposing some solutions. So make sure, obviously, that when you are proposing solutions, you have a collaborative solution. So it can't be driven just by management. There has to be a collaborative effort between the associate, because you really want their buy-in. They should be coming up with the solution because they're the ones who are going to be incorporating this change. So make sure it's collaborative, but understand how that solution that you're proposing or they're proposing, how you're collaboratively proposing, how this is impacting other metrics, both positively and adversely. So every action, there's a reaction. That's very true. So understanding how this modification is going to impact other things is absolutely key. And what I've always managed to is, if you have one change that impacts multiple metrics favorably, that is the best one to choose. You don't want to do a bunch of changes and people can't remember all these changes, but if you have one change that impacts positively multiple metrics, that is where the magic happens. Look for simple solutions. We talked about this earlier. Look for the simple solutions and avoid overcomplicated issues, because whatever solution that is being proposed collaboratively, that person's got to incorporate the change, or maybe an operation has to incorporate the change. And the last thing you want is something complicated, because when you're doing a change, it takes time to develop that new habit. So the simpler the solution, the better. Always avoid Band-Aid type of solutions. This is something that I've seen many times in my career, where a manager will have and this happens, I'm sure a lot of us can resonate with this. A lot of us have seen someone who's behind, maybe on their desk, they're having a hard time keeping up. So what do? They reassign some of their stuff to another associate who is keeping up. That's a Band-Aid type of solution, because you're not getting to the root of the issue. Because guess what happens usually? That person, they may feel better and they may be caught up once you reassign some of the items. But if you have not identified what the root issue is, I guarantee you they will be behind again. So you cannot keep doing that. And really, I am not a proponent of ever actually doing that, unless it's an absolute, necessary thing, and maybe the person had to take some time off, things of that nature. But reassigning people's work and not getting to the root of the issue does not solve the problem. Okay. So some of the items that I've seen, you've incorporated the solution, we've identified the issue, we have a collaborative plan, we come up with a great solution, follow up. Make sure there is follow up. So this is key for meeting and exceeding expectations. You want to make sure you measure that improvement and adjust it accordingly, because obviously if you come up with something and it's not working, you got to adjust it. Make sure you're understanding the other impacts. So maybe you thought this solution was fantastic, but maybe it's having an impact on something else. What are those impacts? What is going on? Any other departments impacted? And then obviously you want to say, hey, is this solution, am I now meeting and exceeding expectations? And if the answer is yes, then fantastic. That is exactly what you want, right? If you're not, you tweak it a little bit. You go back and you adjust it accordingly, and you do the same thing in terms of your follow-up. So let's wrap this up in a bow. We had a real quick video on meeting and exceeding expectations. Every person in an organization always has to meet expectations. There's no getting around that. That is just how every operation works. That's how you measure performance. We always want to understand if we are not meeting expectations, understand the root of the problem. Identify the solutions that positively impact one or more metrics. These are your, you've heard the term killing two birds with one stone. You want to kill as many birds with one stone as possible. Make sure that the solution has positive impacts throughout and avoid, obviously, adverse impacts. Keep your problem solving simple. Simplicity, it's hard to actually come up with simple solutions sometimes. So simplicity isn't always easy to find, but keep your problem solving simple. It may take some time to think about, but keep the problem solving simple. It has a much more lasting impact with staff, and it's easier to incorporate. Make sure that it's collaborative in nature. It cannot be driven just by management. It has to be collaboration between the associate and management whenever there is an issue. Make sure it's collaborative in nature, and the key is follow up. Is that solution working? Is it getting to help the person meeting and exceeding expectations? If the answer is yes, fantastic. If it's no, adjust it accordingly. So I hope you've enjoyed our video on the keys to meeting and exceeding expectations. And for additional information or to schedule a session with me, please visit my website at www.yourimpoweredyou.com. Feel free to email me at bman@yourimpoweredyou.com or give me a call at 916-633-2555. And I thank you very much and have a very empowered day.